Good afternoon again. So here I am again with Deputy Chief Manny Arabola from the Doral Police Department here in Doral, Florida, Miami-Dade County. Between demoted you, between Deputy Chief Arabola and myself, we have a combined 80 years of police experience and probably, a little bit less than that in training both security, law enforcement, and the private sector. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to get his perspective, which is expertise perspective on the proper and effective use of the chain of command. This coupled in with the documentation and the theory that you're going to be emailed should mend everything together, and it should put it into like a working type of function. So having said that, Deputy Chief Arabola, let's talk about the effective use of the chain of first line supervision, their role, specifically in the hospitality security industry, specifically OPAC or Bimini North, where you have tourists and you have guests and the like.
Greetings once again. And again, Dr. Davila has explained to me a little bit about what the needs were. And it always takes me back to what we do when we teach, for example, a middle management course, a high level executive level course. Any type of executive level course usually begins with what is the vision? What is the mission? What are the goals of the organization? The reason why that is so critical at the beginning is that if it is not a clearly defined vision and mission, then any which way we go, we're winning. It would be the equivalent of getting in a car and not knowing where we're going. So therefore, any which way we drive, we accomplish the goal because there was no goal to begin with. But if we begin with a very clear, concise vision of where your agency is trying to go to, and I'm going to kind of put out there somewhat of what could be a vision, right? So I would say that a vision would be a professional officer, security person,
security component,
who represents the ownership, who represents the establishment in the most appropriate manner, that visually and also as they speak to any customer, any guest, or any employee of the resort, that they would be promoting the best foot forward that they can. And we, right, as we design that vision and mission, we have to be able to see what that looks like. There has to be a clearly defined, impeccable uniform, behavior, decorum, as customers approach, as guests approach, as employees approach. We want to see that our employees are the very, very best, that without any kind of second guessing, when we look at the employee, we can look at them and say, that is the very, very best that we have to offer.
And at times we describe that as command presence, as it's been trained for you when we're talking about ethics and we're talking about security officer presence. Command presence is the sheer knowledge of having a person look at you and know that they're dealing with a professional security officer without even uttering a word. And Deputy Chief Arabola will tag on to what I'm saying there.
Once we're clear on that, on what that command presence, on what the visual is, on what the communication, once we're clear on that, on the vision, then the next step begins where we can start very clearly outlining how we get there. And so first line supervisors, middle managers, everyone up and down the chain of command has the same goal. They have the same GPS address to put into their phone or whatever the device they're using to drive there. The chain of command then is used appropriately to get to that goal. And so through the use of positive discipline and negative discipline, we are all driving and we're all rowing in the same direction. So now we're not just kind of implementing discipline for the sake of punitive purposes. We're not simply, talking down to employees. We don't do that. we lift up the officers, we lift up the employees, we elevate them, we treat them with respect. We don't demand respect, we give respect, and therefore respect is given back. We gain respect from the employees in the way we treat them, the way we respect them, and it's almost automatic that we will not accept anything else given back to ourselves, since number one, we put it out there to begin with. Everything about positive discipline and the negative discipline, as it can be called, whether it's with praise, whether it's sometimes with reprimand, whether in verbal counseling or in written reprimand, if it elevates to that level, there's a progressive sense to that. The day-to-day conversation should be positive. It should be looking for what the employees are doing correctly and reaffirming those things. In our line of business, we tend to look for what employees are doing incorrectly. And so we get trained on, you were late today. You were 5 minutes late. But yet for the last 90 days, I was on time and no one ever said anything. But today I was late for 5 minutes. So somebody mentioned something. We get a lot more from dealing with the positive, reaffirming the positive, giving commendation, giving praise when we find those things. So that's what takes work from our supervisors, is to find the officers doing the right thing. Find them in the right uniform. And whenever possible, publicly praise them for their uniform, for their decorum, for the way they sit up at the guardhouse, for the way they greet the visitors, for the way they speak to each other. Sometimes it's difficult to do because it's almost like we expect it. So since you're doing it, you're only doing your job. Yes, in a way. But we lose sight of how much praising that will then duplicate itself, and others will want to also be praised. They will also seek what they're finding in this one employee, and they'll duplicate that. Whenever necessary, we must do the other part, right? So if there is a repeat behavior that we're trying to correct, then we must start with some level of at least counseling sheet, even if that's not formal reprimand, but it's some kind of form of saying, this is not acceptable, here's what you need to do, and I know the next time you will do better, right? I know that you will, because you're a good employee, that's why I hired you. I know that you can do better, I've seen you do better, and therefore here's the counseling that I know you're going to correct. And now if that continues, we move on to other levels of reprimand, and to the point of all the way up to termination if need be, right? We don't want to do that to an employee. However, if it gets to that point, then it gets to that point and we deal with it. So that it sends a message. It's not just for that employee, but it's to send a message to everybody else. If there's a certain level of behavior expected, we are paying you for that behavior, and so we expect it.
Yes. Deputy Chief Arabola mentioned the vision of where we're driving to. Let me reiterate Mr. Capo's vision. Mr. Capo's vision is definitely to have a professional security component. How is he arriving at that? By making a great investment in hiring, training, uniforms, and continuous education. We've been in this industry, like we mentioned a little while ago, combined 80 years. You seldom find in the private sector security training a person like Mr. Capo that wants to invest. He doesn't talk the talk, he's walking the walk by making an investment in you, an investment in excellence. So his vision is he wants to see the payoff, and his payoff is a professional security component that when a guest arrives there, not only do they feel safe, they feel like they're being treated with courtesy and respect and communications amongst those the security officers and their supervisors. Talking about communication up and down the chain of command, could you just touch upon that, just 2 minutes, on the proper form of the chain of commands, grievances, things of that nature?
So in the previous video, we spoke a little bit about culture, right? And it has to it has to be across the board, where the culture understands that there's an expectation of the first line supervisor to handle and to bring up the lower level to within the standard of the vision. If that isn't being done at the first line supervisor, middle management needs to step up and ensure that it's happening at that other level. We sometimes have to like back up a little bit and say, what is it that I'm not doing? Don't put it on the officer. If you have a systemic issue within your entire organization and you're saying, these people suck, right? We hear that sometimes. These employees are not doing their job. If it is systemic, if it is across the board, then an honest conversation at our level, we have to look in the mirror and say, what am I not doing? Where am I failing to communicate effectively the vision? And so exactly how to get there, exactly what kind of meetings you have one-on-one with each one of the supervisors that work for you, each one of the levels, whether you bring in all of the first-line supervisors at one level and you have a communication with them and you talk about what is expected at their level so that they understand very clearly that they have your support, but they also have a mandate from you. And so on. And so the next level. And those directly under you, I'm not sure what the structure is for you, but I'll tell you that whoever is under you needs to be very, very clear about your expectations of them. Because if not, what they're doing is they're putting your job on the line. And so those people directly under you, if they're truly your friends, right, or they truly respect you, they will carry on the mission. It starts with you pushing on a vision and a mission that needs to be accomplished. And those are directly, and I'll give you one example. Here in Miami-Dade County, we've recently started working with the fire department on mass casualty training. And I've noticed that the fire department here locally is very, very involved and committed to success. So I asked one of the fire chiefs the other day about that. I said, I've never seen this. And he told me, he says, the number 2 is very, very good friends with the number 1. And the number 2 knows that the one way for number 1 to lose his job is for us to fail in a mass casualty situation where fire is being required to go and act. That failing at that point would be the job of the number 1. He loses his job, basically what he's telling me. So to take that example, those that are right under you, they need to be committed to your success. They need to be, and I don't mean by that they hang out with you, that they go drinking with you. What I mean by that is that they make sure that they find ways to ensure the proper behavior of those at the bottom. The chain of command has to work in that way, where the information, you cannot directly supervise each employee. You have got to trust, hire the right people under you, make sure that they understand the mission, and then make sure that they understand that they need to be committed to you for your survival in this business.
Understood. Well, that's pretty much a wrap. I thank you for your professional input, Manny. Deputy Chief Arabola, God bless. I hope this has been informative to you, and please, let's go ahead and apply it. Stay well.